The first playoff rankings are here, and there's a very clear message. They don't like the ACC, but they like the Big 12.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest, craziest sport on planet Earth. How does BYU win in Lubbock? We'll explore that on today's show. Under the radar games with playoff implications this week. That's what we've got today. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Miami was down to number 18. Number 18 after losing to SMU. Now, I too punish Miami in my own top 25 rankings, which I do want to point out. I think I made a mistake. After thinking about it more, I put Notre Dame too high. They should be on the outside looking in from the top 10, but that's not fully relevant to the point I'm making here. Just that Miami's in there and they have the same record and all that, and Miami won the game, and that needs to matter. But the loss to SMU is one that really is punishing Miami, being all the way down at number 18, because SMU doesn't have a great resume. They've got a loss to Baylor on their schedule, who's not very good. So the ACC just, I think, all but crystallize unless they really pick up momentum in the final few weeks. The committee wants the ACC to be a one-bid league. And if you think that that is egregious, if you think that that is giving too much credit to SEC teams with 2 losses compared to, I want to take you back to the non-conference slate, and I'm going to defend the committee in this spot. I think Miami down to 18 was dropping them too low because they do have, by the committee's own metrics, a win over a top 10 team. That should be rewarded more than being number 18, even though they have 2 losses that don't look great. Now, the Louisville loss, not bad, because the Cardinals are 7-1, whose only loss is to a ranked Virginia team, who's in there at number 14. But Virginia is the highest ranked ACC team at number 14. And Miami being all the way that far down means that the committee didn't forget what happened in the non-conference slate. There were a lot of opportunities all over the place for the ACC to pick up wins against the SEC, and it just didn't arise. Or even the Big Ten. It didn't happen. There are a lot of examples. I don't need to go through them all. But coming out of the first 3 to 4 weeks of college football, my takeaway here on the show was, hey, the ACC looks like the 4th best league. That's how the committee views it as well. Because you have got 2-loss Utah in the Big 12. They're ahead of Virginia. 2-loss Oklahoma. 2-loss Texas. 2-loss Notre Dame, who have 1 good win over USC. And that's a good win. Not a great win, but a good win. And Notre Dame is sitting there 4 slots ahead of the highest ranked ACC team. So for Miami specifically, this means their battle to get into the college football playoff is all but lost. I mean, if they wind up at 10-2, which they went last year and didn't get into the playoff, would it get them over the hump? Maybe if Pitt's ranked high enough. That's the only currently ranked team they've got left on their schedule. They have Syracuse this week. They have NC State the following week. Then they go at Virginia Tech and at Pitt. That game against the Panthers, who came in at number 24, little bit of a surprise, but not completely shocking. I mentioned them recently on the show that they've been playing much better football. Miami has to go out and not just win every one of those games. They have to do so convincingly, and they need Pitt to be a 9-win team by the time they reach that regular season finale. And even then, they're going to have to overcome a lot. I don't think those next 3 wins, when you're starting down at number 18, are going to do a ton. So then the ACC looks up, and you say, well, you've got Virginia, you've got Louisville in the fold, but they're all the way down number 14 and 15. Look at the way the committee, so bottom line, not a good result for the ACC overall in their quest to get 2 teams into the playoff. On the other side of that spectrum, you have the Big 12. This was exactly what you were looking for the Big 12. Utah after thrashing Cincinnati, who goes to be unranked. Okay. That seemed dramatic, but okay. Cincinnati is on the outside looking, but Utah is sitting there with a quality loss by a few points at BYU, who is at number 7, and then you have Texas Tech at number 8. I don't think it could have gone any better for the Big 12. This is a phenomenal start. And I felt coming into the season, more likely than not, the Big 12 winds up being a one-bid league once again. That is way more likely for the ACC because of Miami's losses, both being to teams that were unranked at the time and who, if not for that, SMU is still unranked. But if Miami had taken care of Louisville, the Cardinals wouldn't be ranked. And I think that is being held against the Hurricanes in this particular spot. But you have BYU playing Texas Tech this weekend. And the Big 12, if you were Brett Yormark, and he'd never say this publicly, of course, you want more than anything, you want Texas Tech to win that football game. Because if the Red Raiders beat BYU and those teams then rematch in the Big 12 championship game with 11-1 records, when they're starting inside the top 10 and they're squaring off this week, the loser can't go down that far. That would be, now, the committee and voters can do illogical things, but where in the lineup of teams here are good losses not being rewarded? Look at Notre Dame. Has 2 good losses. One doesn't look as good because of Miami, but it was only by 3 points. And the Texas A&M loss, well, it came down to the last play and it was really tight. What if BYU loses by 3? Where should they fall? From 7 to probably 9, quite frankly. I would still keep BYU ahead of Notre Dame if that were to happen this week. And I'll talk about that game more later on today's show. But the Notre Dame thing was weird. It felt, as they were revealing all the teams, like they being the people that produced and hosted the show, like they were immediately trying to justify Notre Dame's ranking at number 10. And I told you earlier, once I saw it on there and thought about it more, I overrated them in my top 25 at number 10. I'll make that adjustment next week. But the way that it came off, they were the first team that had highlights showed, and it seemed like they had it all queued up as like, hey, we're going to show Notre Dame at number 10, and then we immediately have to make them look really good. They even showed a highlight from the Miami game, which they lost. I thought all that was really, really weird. But bringing this back to the Big 12 for a moment, this was a dream start to get both your teams well inside the top 10, about as high as you could have hoped for, and to have Utah sitting there inside the top 15. If Utah takes care of business, they're going to get considered at 10-2. This could be tracking towards not just a 2-bid Big 12. There's a world where this is a 3-bid Big 12. Based on these initial rankings, this is a great place to start. You got to take care of business. Things have to go right. You need BYU and Texas Tech to either meet in the conference championship game at 11-1, or let me throw this at you. BYU wins, Texas Tech at 10-2 gets to the conference title game, gets the automatic berth, beating them there, and BYU is 12-1, a la what happened with Kansas State and TCU several seasons ago in the 14 playoff when TCU went to the national championship game. So, not a good day for the ACC, but a really good day for the Big 12. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. Let's talk about that game in Lubbock. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Every game that I talk about for college football here on the show is available over at FanDuel. Yeah, it's right there. If you think you know how those games are playing out, or if you just want to get a bunch of great information, FanDuel has it covered. They've got point spreads, money line, point totals, prop bets, futures bets, everything you could possibly want. FanDuel has you covered. So the next thing that I want you to do is ask yourself this question. What are you waiting for? I don't know either. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. BYU got the respect they deserved in the college football playoff rankings. Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars is here to discuss just that. They take on the team ranked one slot behind them, understandably so, because Texas Tech has a loss. BYU doesn't. I want to start with your rankings reaction, Jake. Did you feel BYU was rated appropriately?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually expected BYU to be a little worse than they were. So to have them sitting at number 7, I will take that every day, especially considering BYU's more recent history with the College Football Playoff Committee actually downgrading them more often than upgrading them.
Yeah, I mean, last year the narrative for BYU at the end was they're 10-2 with a road win over a playoff team, and there was just no discussion in the national space outside of maybe my show about what BYU's playoff chances were. It's just, nope, can't do it. And everyone looks around and goes, wait a minute, 10 wins, road playoff team win. What are we missing? So what do you think the threshold is this year? Is it the same that it's been? You think BYU has to win 11 games or be a 2-loss Big 12 champion?
Yeah, that's easy to say because here's the deal. If BYU has 2 losses in the regular season, Spencer, suddenly the Big 12 is kind of back where it was last year with a bunch of teams right there amongst one another. And in many respects, if BYU loses 2 games down the stretch here, there is a really scary scenario that Utah, who they have a head-to-head win over, could actually get their slot in Arlington simply due to conference schedule strength of record.
How would that work out?
They have the overall strength of record is better for Utah right now than it is for BYU. And that's one of the key tiebreakers in the Big 12 race. It's a big reason why BYU, I've said this before on my podcast, I think I've said it here before, BYU last year lost to Kansas and Arizona State. Had BYU beaten Kansas and lost to Houston, they still would have made it into the Big 12 title game instead of vice versa.
But the head-to-head has to be there first.
Not in the way that it's shaken out right now with this Big 12 race.
Wait, hold on. For those listening or watching, you can tell I'm getting this information for the very first time. Yeah. You're telling me that if BYU has 2 Big 12 losses at the end of the year, and Utah has 2 Big 12 losses, and BYU beat them, the Utes could go to the Big 12 championship game and BYU could not?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And are you saying that to give me a dumbfounded look, or are you saying that because that's what the rules actually dictate?
That's what the rules dictate right now. It's the way it could shake out. So here's a simple fact for BYU. Lose 1 game, you're playing in Arlington, and you're likely in contention for a college football playoff berth. If you're 10-2, yeah, you got to hope that Utah drops a game along the path for you to still be in Arlington and have a chance to go to the playoff.
Brett Yormark, what are you doing, man? What? It's fine to have other tiebreakers if there's no head-to-head. The first tiebreaker is supposed to be head-to. Okay. All right. Let's talk about this game against Texas Tech, because this is one of the best games of the year in college football. It is the game day matchup, understandably so. I think it is great. In Lubbock, BYU, an underdog of almost 10 points. I talked about that on my show yesterday, Jake, and it just makes me go, I don't know. What is BYU the team that Vegas can't figure out, or are they going 2 for 2 after Utah with a game day game was an 8.5, 9.5 point favorite, and they win by 31 last week against the Bearcats? Give me your outlook of this game against the Red Raiders for BYU.
I'm not sure why the line is so decided in favor of Texas Tech, because BYU, simply put, has just found ways to win all season long. I think it's probably due to the fact they've had to come back in a bunch of these Big 12 games that Vegas feels like there's like a little bit of a luck runs out scenario maybe coming to fruition this weekend in Lubbock for them. But I think BYU is very capable of covering. I think it's a 9.5 point spread last I checked when we recorded this podcast. I still think the Cougars are within a score of Texas Tech. I don't think it's as high as 10 points.
If BYU wins this game, what has happened?
Everything that I have believed about BYU and wanted to be true is true. I don't know.
Let me ask a more direct question. For BYU to go on the road and beat a really good team, like we know, Texas Tech is a really good team. When Baron Morton is healthy, look, I have made some incorrect predictions in my day, Jake. I have also had some nail on the head, spot on. Nothing has been as sharp as my preseason number one power ranking team in the Big 12 was Texas Tech. I think that's my best one to date, just based on, I don't know, when Baron Morton's healthy, they're beating the crap out of the entire conference so far. If BYU goes to Lubbock and wins this game, what will they have done?
They will have asserted themselves as an actual playoff contender. Because if you can beat the likes of Texas Tech, Spencer, I think you're capable of contending for a national title. Because I am with you. I think Texas Tech was the class of the Big 12 preseason, have proven that when they are 100% healthy, you mentioned Baron Morton in particular, they just beat up on people. And don't have to look any further if you're a BYU fan than what they did to Utah. And I know that Will Hammond came into that game, but I'm telling you, this is a Texas Tech team that is not to be taken lightly. If given the opportunity, they will absolutely pound you into the ground, and BYU has to avoid that.
When you look at this matchup and get into the X's and O's and all of it, are there one, two, or maybe even three things that stand out as, man, if BYU doesn't do this, then the game is just not going to go their way?
They have to find a way to establish a ground game. We understand that LJ Martin is going to go in this game. How healthy is he? That remains to be determined. Aaron Roderick has said it himself. We're going to find out on Saturday. He's going to give it a go. If BYU cannot find a consistent ground game that keeps Texas Tech's defense honest, and what I mean by that is keeping guys like David Bailey from pinning their ears back and coming after Bear Bachmeier, it's going to be a really, really long game for BYU and Lubbock. The other thing I'm paying attention to is the health of BYU's own linebacking core. Jack Kelly, Isaiah Glasker, Stiali Asera, all have picked up injuries in the last few weeks. That bye week was much needed for them to heal up. If they are close to anywhere near 100%, that will be a major, major help to BYU's defense having a chance to slow down Texas Tech.
I think the BYU offensive line is critical in this one. Not that they aren't important in any game, but I think there's just an added level of the Cougars have to get that group to play well. If they don't, I think this is just such a tough spot to be in on the road. Obviously, BYU off the bye, but Texas Tech at home. Crowds should be on fire. But you can't, as you mentioned, get Texas Tech's defense into spots where they know you're throwing the ball. If David Bailey can just not have to worry about a running threat whatsoever, that's a problem. But the other reason, the O-line, I think, is the most important group in this game for BYU to ultimately get the win, Jake, is that the run game, staying out of third and long, those two things also go hand in hand. You hear coaches say all the time, stay ahead of the chain, stay on schedule. BYU has to stay on schedule, and if the offensive line is getting pushed around, that's going to be difficult, and Bear Bachmeier is a gamer. Dude can make the winning play. He's not going to go in and go for 290 and 3 touchdowns and be a John Mateer type, a Haynes King type that moves you up and down the field basically by himself. He's got to have that supporting cast, and he's had it this year. I'm not saying that they haven't been able to do that this season. Obviously they have. It's why they're undefeated. But in this game in particular, I think more than any other Big 12 game, including Utah, by the way, that BYU offensive line has to be at its best. If you tell me they just play average, if a time traveler comes from the future, first of all, how'd you do it? Who invented it? How can I make money from it? Second thing is, how does BYU, I just don't know without the O-line how they could find a way to win.
Yeah, they got to keep Bear Bachmeier upright and give him the space to operate, because you mentioned the fact he's a gamer. When given time and space, he is absolutely deadly. But what Texas Tech has proven with guys like David Bailey and Jacob Rodriguez and the host of characters they have in that front seven is they are ferocious, they're swarming, and BYU's offensive line has to be able to protect him. I fully expect also their tight ends and running backs will be held in on max protects as well. Because like I mentioned, if you can keep him upright, speaking of Bear Bachmeier, that will give you a fighting chance. But it's a much more difficult task than any other team BYU has played to this point, because Texas Tech's defense is absolutely top tier.
You have a score prediction in this game, Jake?
I've been going back and forth on this. I'm just going to say this. If the line holds right around 10 points, I think BYU covers. I think they're within that threshold of being in this game. But I'm still not certain of what I'm going to peg down as my score yet.
I'm kind of with you because we're recording this episode on Tuesday night. That's too early. That's way too early for predictions. Here on Locked On College Football, we're in game discussion mode, and we love doing that with Jake Hatch, Locked On BYU Cougars. Great, as always. Playoff implications, playoff hopes are on the line, under the radar games to keep an eye on this weekend. I'm going to give you two games that you need to watch this weekend, or at least have on a side screen or be tracking the score, because the playoff implications are very real, but they're not going to get a ton of national attention because of who's playing. Let me start with Virginia hosting Wake Forest this week. Virginia is a top 15 team. Wake Forest is under first-year head coach Jake Dickert. Things are going swimmingly well for the Demon Deacons, might I add. They beat SMU a couple weeks ago. The Mustangs, of course, bounced back against Miami last week. But Wake Forest is outperforming their preseason expectations and look like they could be on a positive trajectory. You know what would really jumpstart good feelings for that program and a first-year head coach that knows he's playing with some house money? He's not looking for a conference championship berth. Just get to a bowl game and keep finding moments. SMU was one, Virginia would be another, where you prove to your fans, to your donor base, to your administration, hey, this is going in the right direction. One of those flag planting moments. He's got one of them. He could have a second one this week. Because if you go on the road and beat Virginia on their home field, I tell you what, that'd be quite the upset. Now, of course, Virginia's favored in the game, so who's going to watch? Oh, look at that. It's under a touchdown point spread, according to our friends at FanDuel. And this particular line is reflective of what I think the committee did by putting Virginia as, let me double check the rankings real quick. Yes, Virginia is one of the lowest ranked one-loss teams. The only team with one loss that is ranked lower is who? Yes, Georgia Tech. The ACC, not in a very good spot. They're waiting for a game like this. That's how it feels from the committee. They are waiting for Virginia to lose this game, or for Georgia Tech to lose another game, or any number of things. They're waiting for Louisville to lose another game, for Miami to drop a third and make them feel justified in having the Hurricanes far too low in these initial playoff rankings. All of that could come together if Virginia winds up losing to Wake Forest, a team that's playing with some house money. Now, the Cavaliers have been playing good football. I picked them to lose last week because they were going all the way across the country. Cal is a little bit better than you'd think. It was one of my best bets, and, well, we don't have to revisit that particular horrific story. I was that final play away from a third straight winning week, and Cal just couldn't quite get it done. But you know what? That's okay. Forgive, forget, move on, try to get better there. So Virginia has to win that spot. It really feels like any of these ACC teams, whether it's Virginia or Louisville or Georgia Tech, they have to win out. And there is precedent that SMU last year was 11-1, didn't have an incredible strength of schedule relative to some of the other teams, but because they were 11-1, they lost their conference title game 11-2, they were in. Now, I think it's reasonable to infer, given that history, that if SMU had missed the conference title game but been 11-1, they would have made the playoff. So that looks like it is the threshold. And based on the initial rankings, it still looks like that is the threshold, is you have to be an 11-win team. Because Virginia plays Wake Forest. Next week they play at Duke. That's a sneaky tough game because Duke is still alive in the ACC championship picture. As crazy as that sounds, that's the way it is. And then they play Virginia Tech. Those are the final three games and with an interim head coach, a rivalry game, potential playoff and conference title implications, that could get wild and crazy. So Virginia this week is not going to gain anything by beating Wake Forest, but they have got so much to lose. Now, the conference title picture would still be in play because, remember, Virginia lost to NC State earlier this year. who's kind of a good team, kind of not a good team. I don't really know. I don't know if NC State knows. They're like the best 5-4 team that can also be the worst 5-4 team in all of college football. But that wasn't an ACC game. So the Cavaliers remain the only unbeaten in ACC play. And Wake Forest is not going to the conference championship game. And so a loss doesn't cost them a head-to-head matchup, but it introduces the possibility of missing out via tiebreakers. But if they lose, their hopes of being an at-large, I think, go away. I really do. If they go 11-1, make the conference title game, they're in. Same goes for Louisville. Same goes for Georgia Tech. So that's the first game that you need to keep an eye on this week, because Wake Forest has quietly played some pretty good football. They're doing all right. They're nothing special. They're nothing great, but they can find a way. That field goal against SMU, I think, was 52, 53 yards, somewhere at 50 yards. It had a 5. I remember that. It had a 5 in front of the yardage total, and it wound up going through the uprights. They just found a way. So watch out for that game. Here's another one. Vanderbilt, playing for their playoff lives every single week. If Vanderbilt wins out, and I apply this logic to Vanderbilt, I apply this logic to Texas, I apply this logic to Oklahoma, the highest ranked 2-loss teams, all of them. Aside from Utah, who I've talked about, I think would have a chance at 10-2, but I don't think they control their own fate. And Utah should want all these teams to lose, by the way, so they can fall behind them record-wise. Texas, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt. If those teams, any of those teams, win out, they're going to be in the playoff, and they should be. Vanderbilt has Auburn this week. And this is a different type of house money emotionally on the other side. DJ Durkin was the defensive coordinator until he got promoted to being the interim head coach for the Tigers. He, as I have discussed, could be a very real candidate for the Auburn coaching job. And I believe if I were an Auburn fan, I would want to see him beat Vanderbilt and Alabama before I'd say, let's make DJ Durkin the next head coach of the Auburn Tigers. Well, here's opportunity number 1. And once again, this is a point spread that's under a touchdown. And Vanderbilt, coming off of a loss last week against Texas in which they got pushed around, I don't think Auburn, from a physical standpoint, is Texas, but they are closer to that than South Carolina, let's say, which is one of the better wins that Vanderbilt has on the resume this year. This is another game where it's the same spot. Auburn isn't any good. They're spiraling down. They could beat you, but you're not going to get any credit because of the season that they're having for beating them. But a loss takes you out. A 3-loss Vanderbilt, I don't care if they beat Tennessee at the end of the year. Tennessee is hanging on by a thread to being a top 25 team in my poll, in the playoff poll, in the AP poll, everywhere. And if you don't think they should be a top 25 team, I don't think there's actually a great argument to push back on. Like, I just say, I've watched them, and the best thing you can say about Tennessee is they've got some quality losses, but their best wins, they're not really out there. And so for the Vols in that spot, their playoff season is done. Their playoff hopes are done for this particular season. They could play spoiler to Vanderbilt in the last week of the regular season in rivalry week. That would be really fun. But Vanderbilt has to get there first. They play Auburn. They play Kentucky at home. Huge matchups for the Commodores. But if they win their next 3, I think they will be and should be in the college football playoff. But Auburn just feels like one of those teams that, man, they're not missing the talent. They're a bit like Florida, who almost tripped up Georgia last week. They're not missing the talent. They are missing the proper coaching. Well, we're going to find out what type of coaching DJ Durkin can give that program. And he's got his first opportunity on the road this week. So Virginia and Vanderbilt, 2 teams that have to win. Vanderbilt more so than Virginia. At home, 6.5-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel, against teams that emotionally have got house money for different reasons. Those are under the radar playoff games you've got to keep an eye on this week. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.